Hi everyone, my name is Rajita. I'm lecturer in commerce and working at Government Degree College, Mortad. Topic is verification and valuation of assets and liabilities. First, let's see the introduction to verification. So, one of the most important duties of an auditor is audit of accounts of a concern to verify the assets and liabilities appearing in the balance sheet of a business concern. This is the most important thing that the financial position of a company is revealed through balance sheet. So, it is very important when an auditor auditing the accounts of a concern, he must verify each asset and liabilities which appears in the balance sheet. Meaning of verification means providing the truth or confirmation. So with this verification, the truth is revealed because the physical verification is done of the assets and liabilities, and after physical verification the confirmation is comes from the auditor about assets and liabilities, which gives the confidence for concern and the stakeholders who are invested in the company. And then verification is an auditing process in which auditor satisfy himself with the actual existence of assets and liabilities appearing in the statement of financial position. So as I discussed, that physical verification is done of assets and liability which are appearing in the financial statement, in the statement of balance sheet. So it will reveals the financial position of a company. Now the objectives of a verification. Why they have to do verification? To show the correct valuation of assets and liabilities. So by verifying, we can the auditor can evaluate the assets and liabilities at a accuracy with accuracy and with confirmation. And the other objective is to know whether the balance sheet exhibits a true and fair view of the state of affairs of the business. So here, by verification, we can know that a balance sheet showing the true and fair values of assets and liabilities of the concern. And the next objective is to find out the ownership and title of assets. So here in this verification, the true owner and the title of assets can be verified. So whatever the assets company having, whatever the whether they are registered in a legal name, and whether they have the ownership of assets or not is revealed by the verification. And the next objective is to find out whether assets were in existence. Sometimes company may misleads the stakeholders by showing the false assets um, in balance sheet, like goodwill. So with the verification, the false assets can be finded out. And frauds and errors can also be detected with verification, because the thorough verification is done in verification process of assets and liabilities. If any frauds that company is trying to do, so those can be finded out with verification. And the other objective is to find out whether there is an adequate internal control regarding acquisition, utilization, and disposal of assets. So let's say, for example, the depreciating assets are there in the company, whether they depreciating in a correct method and the disposal of the asset is in a proper way or not, whether how they are doing it. So these can be found out with the verification of assets, and to verify the arithmetic accuracy of the account. So the trial balance is also prepared before and after verification, so the arithmetic accuracy can be uh, mm, find it out, and to ensure that the asset we have that the assets have been recorded properly. So after all the verification done, the it it ensures that assets and liabilities are recorded in a proper manner. So let's see the valuation of valuation. So valuation is the process of valuing a company's assets and liabilities for financial reporting purposes. Several accounting valuation methods are used while preparing financial statements in order to value assets. So here valuation of assets is very important, because the value of assets are different method, like market value is there, fair value is there, purchased value is there. So in which method they are evaluating the asset is very important, because with that the financial position of a company can change. So the proper method is very important for evaluating assets. Assets needs different valuating method. For example, securities should definitely marketed with valuated with market value. So the other fixed assets uh, is a decision of the company whether they are evaluating with the purchase value, or whether they're evaluating it with the market value. So it depends upon the company's policy, but the different methods should follow for different assets and for different liabilities. Next is importance of verification and valuation of assets and liabilities. Why the verification and valuation is important for a concern about assets and liabilities. The first thing is to show the actual financial position. So by verification and valuation, the company and the stakeholders can know the actual financial position of a concern or a business, to know the real position of profit and loss. And so physical verification is done in a verification process. So with that the profit and loss can be decided. So with that the company can know the real profit of that company. So to increase goodwill, so the clerks and accountants can make some mistakes while calculating evaluating the assets. So with the in the verification process, those can be finded out, and it can increase the goodwill of a company if the positive things are founded in in verification. And to assure shareholders, because the shareholders are the owners of the company, they have the right to know the financial position of the company. So the verification and valuation very important to keep the interest of shareholders in the company, and easy for sale, and the correct valuation gives the correct value for asset. So the sale of a asset becomes easy for the company, and for the buyers it is also easy to know the value of the asset, and easy to get loan. So by giving those assets as security, so the company can get loans easily without any delay. If there is any problem of valuation, so there could be delay in getting loans. So if the pre verification and valuation done for the asset, so it is very easy to get loan, and it is very to acquire knowledge about assets for the bank people is also very easy, so they can sanction loan easily and easy to get compensation. So if the verification and valuation done in the proper way, the two people, the buyer and seller, can easily understand the value, and the compensation becomes very easy while selling and buying of assets and liabilities. So the next is difference between verification and valuation. So verification is a final work. Verification is final work because after preparation of balance sheet, those assets and liabilities are verified. So it is a final work. So after verification, the actual value comes out from uh, verification. And if we see, the valuation is the initial work and it need to verification. So after valuation, after valuating the asset, it should be verified, because whether the valuation is done in a proper method and in a proper way, and the accuracy can also be checked in a verification. So it is an initial stage, and the verification is the final stage. And if we see, the verification is the work of auditor. So the after evaluating the assets, so the verification is done by auditor, but valuation is the work of concerned authority or board. So the valuation of assets are done by the accountants or the board of directors before going to verification, and the verification is made at the end of the year. So when the audit process is started in the company, the verification of assets will go on, but the valuation made throughout the year. So every time they have to calculate the value of the assets, because whether they increased or decreased, if they are following the market value, they have to calculate the assets value with a regular intervals to match up the market value with the assets and liabilities. Now let's see the classification of assets. So fixed assets, current assets, intangible assets, and fictitious assets. So there are four types of assets um, which are fixed, current, and intangible, and fictitious assets. Get into the verification and valuation processes. Before that, so in order to verify the assets and liabilities, if the auditor verifying the property, so he should distinguish between two types of property, whether the property is freehold or whether the property is leasehold. So whether the company own the property or they took on lease. So the auditor definitely distinguish into these two, because the verification becomes easy if we divide the property into whether the freehold property or a leasehold property. So freehold property. So freehold property can be defined as any estate which is free from hold of any entity besides the owner. Hence, the owner of such estates enjoy free ownership for perpetuity and can use the land for any purpose, however, in accordance with the local regulations. So, if he owns the property, he can use it for any purposes with the local government permission. So this is the advantage with the freehold property. If the company holds it, so it is easy to do with the property in different purposes. Let's see the verification process of freehold property. So the auditor the auditor should examine the title deeds in order to ensure that they are in the name of the client or not. So first he has to see the document of deed, whether the freehold property is in the name of the client. Client means whether the property is in the name of the company or not. This is the first step that auditor has to do when he verifying the freehold property. And next, in case the property is mortgaged, he should obtain a certificate from the mortgagee to effect that the title deeds are in their possession. So after holding the property, if they are mortgaged for taking loan, so he should definitely get certificate from the mortgagee. So how much they are mortgaged it, and for how much time they have mortgaged it. So it is very important when auditing freehold property. And if it is purchased, correspondence and broker's note should be examined. If the purchase is effected through auction, the auctioneer's account should be checked. So if the property bought by the a company from brokers interaction, so he should get the note from brokers that he was a broker for that property while purchasing. And if the purchase is effected through auction, so if they purchased that property in the auction, so auctioneer account should be checked with what is the property purchased price and what is the showing price in the balance sheet. So it is very important in the verification process of freehold property. If the client has constructed the building, the auditor should examine the certificates received from the builder, contractor, architect, and other necessary papers and documents. After purchasing the property, if the company has built building in that property, so he should get a letter from the contractor and the architect for the plan and the construction cost to verify the valued property is in the proper way or not. And if the client owns staff members and also engaged in its construction, auditor should see the reasonable basis of allocation of wages, supervisors charges, and has been adopted. And if it is a construction company, so the construction company can buy the property and they can construct buildings in the property. So if it is in that case, the auditor should get the basis of wages which are given to the laborers and the supervisors charges, whether they are in the reasonable way or not. So these things also should verify by the auditor for freehold property. And leasehold property. A leasehold property is a ownership of a temporary right to hold land or property in which a lessee or a tenant hold right of real property by some form of title from a lessor and or a landlord. So although a tenant does hold right to real property, a leasehold estate is typically considered personal property. So if the company took the land or property in a lease, so the company will be holding the rights for a period of time. So in that period of time they will be having some restrictions to use the purposes, so restricted purposes are there for in leasehold property. So leasehold property verification process. So first the auditor should inspect the lease agreement to find out value of the property and its duration. So first the auditor has to see the lease agreement for how much value they have leased and for how much period of time they are having the lease right on the property or land. And the next, he should see that the terms and conditions of lease are duly complied with. So the terms and conditions should be checked whether the rights and the responsibilities about the leasehold properties. And the annual charge for the depreciation will be eroded by dividing the total cost by the term of the lease. The author should see whether the amount written off is sufficient to provide for depreciation at the end of the term. If it is a depreciating asset, so the author should see whether the depreciation provided on the asset is reasonable or not, and it should definitely divide by the term. So for example, if the company took a land on lease for 10 years, so every year they have to divide the depreciation by the term of the lease. And the next thing is, if the property is sublet, the author should examine the agreement entered into with the sublessee. So after taking lease of the property, the company letting it to other persons, so the auditor should check the agreement, how they letting it out. And if the asset is of building, the tax paid and the repair expenses made for it should be treated as operating expenditure. The auditor should see whether they are treated so or not. So if the building the property is a building, so then the tax paid and the repair expenses, if any repairs occurs to the building, so those things are considered as operating expenses. And the auditor should verify whether the same thing happened in the books or not for the leasehold property. This is about the meaning of verification, valuation, and of freehold property and leasehold property.